This day now marks the passing of a broadcasting legend. Walter Cronkite, age 92, died today. CBS News cut into their primetime programming about a half an hour ago and announced that their legendary anchor from the 1960s and 70s had passed, again at the age of 92. Walter Cronkite had covered everything for CBS News, from the Kennedy assassination to Vietnam to the Apollo missions to the moon to Watergate and everything in between. He was, by all accounts, a legendary, iconic symbol of broadcasting news greatness. And joining us now to talk about the impact of his life on all of us is Brian Williams, anchor and managing editor of NBC Nightly News. And Brian, your thoughts on this passing?
Well, David, thanks for having me. I headed home tonight after Nightly News, and unbelievably, I did a telephone interview for a friend who's preparing a journalism textbook. And she's writing this in Los Angeles, and I just finished talking about Walter and the effect he had on not just my life, but our country and our industry for the past half hour, not knowing until a few minutes ago what had happened. He, you know, from the perspective of my middle-class living room as a little kid, I was born in '59, so I came up right during the height of the Cold War, the space shots, as he used to call them, the moon mission, Vietnam War. He was it. Our dinner couldn't be served in my house until he said, "That's the way it is," at the end of the broadcast. He was the icon. And, you know, when that opinion poll came out in the 1970s calling him the most trusted man in America, it stuck. No one quarreled with it. The moniker just stuck to him forever. He was really the first modern-day anchor. I guess Don Hewitt at CBS is credited with coming up with that term. And people forget, over the next couple of days, we'll talk a lot about how he broke the news of Kennedy's assassination to the country. We remember the black and white video from that day in 1963. He removes his glasses, loses his composure just ever so briefly. He was 47 years old on that day. He had covered, of course, World War II, and young men got old. We're looking at it right now on the air. Young men got old very quickly in that era, and Walter Cronkite lived one of the great American lives.
Brian, for a lot of people who were born after Walter Cronkite was off the air, I wonder if you can put in words the steadfastness or the gravitas of Walter Cronkite that exists to this day, the impact that he still has had on broadcasts, whether it's yours or CBS or ABC, that the network broadcasts in so many ways were defined by the likes of Walter Cronkite.
Well, first of all, try to imagine a country with 3 networks, so just 3 choices in this amazing new box called television, and families, like as they used to gather, and it's hard for us to believe, gather around a radio and kind of stare at it and watch the words come out of it. This was magical. It was black and white, but we didn't know any better. And so when the notion of an evening newscast came around, various anchor combinations were tried. The Camel News Caravan on NBC actually, bore the name of a cigarette company. And then CBS News, they loved the nickname the Tiffany Network, really made their bones from hard news coverage dating back to Ed Murrow, the Blitz in London over radio. They came up with a very, very strong combination headed by Walter Cronkite, who set journalistic standards. He was an old-school print reporter from the Midwest. He was a no-nonsense guy. He loved the airtime. He was an on-camera creature, after all. But his first concern, his first love, was journalism, government. I'm a great collector of the recorded telephone conversations of President Johnson, and to hear those two guys talking, a president at the prime of his power, an anchorman at the prime of his, really sounds like they're running the country over the phone. Almost too close a collusion for journalist and president. But Walter never crossed that line, and he worried about that line until the day he died. He expressed his dismay over some of the trends in television news early and often.
Brian, I'm told that you had at least some contact with Walter Cronkite as you made the transition into the anchor chair at NBC News. I wonder if you can talk briefly about what you knew about him personally.
Oh, I've been very lucky to get to know him. He's had, I'm happy to say he's had dinner in my home. And, you know, when you have public figures who are your icons growing up, people you worship, this is the guy I wanted to be. I don't know how to say it any more plainly. It's so nice when they turn out to be everything you wanted them to be. And this was one such case. He was gracious. He had a terrific sense of humor. Walter's friends were Walter's friends, and there's no one who made fun of Walter more than Walter or his beloved wife Betsy, who we lost a few years ago. A fantastic guy.
Brian, I know that NBC Nightly News and MSNBC, we've all been going back through a lot of tapes in the preparation for the anniversary on Monday of the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the one where when Walter Cronkite was doing the broadcast, he was momentarily speechless when Neil Armstrong was putting his foot down in that famous transmission, One Small Step. And later he apologized for being speechless.
Yeah, talk about old school. Can you imagine? And they did something quite controversial. Obviously, we were glued to those grainy black and white live TV images from the surface of the moon, after all. And we watched Armstrong step out. We heard Walter say simply, "Man on the moon." And after the landing, Cronkite appeared to be drenched in sweat. They cut away from the surface of the moon to show the anchorman, and he was just looking around in absolute amazement because this American life had spanned such a great distance. It was still an outlandish idea that this was happening at all. But again, you know, I was watching him that night. I was watching that coverage. It's unbelievable that his death comes now as we're looking 40 years back to the moonshot. And so many Americans were watching him at the height of his power. A friend of mine says Cronkite used to address the nation. Other people did the evening news.
Brian Williams, managing editor, anchor of the NBC Nightly News, who got to know Walter Cronkite and, like so many of us, grew up watching Walter Cronkite and his incredible broadcasts on the CBS Evening News. And Brian, thank you so much for being part of this and being part of our coverage tonight as we remember Walter Cronkite, who died today at the age of 92. And Brian, thanks again.
David, thanks. I'm flattered to be asked.
Okay. We're going to have much more on the life of Walter Cronkite, his work, how he's being remembered tonight by his friends. We will talk to Daniel Shore, a correspondent with CBS News for many years, who now works at NPR, but worked with Walter Cronkite for so many years. We will talk to him on the other side of this break. You're watching Countdown on MSNBC.